I could do that.
In The Last and First Men, Stapleton describes the rise and fall of 8 human species, one after the other, beginning with us, the first men, in which were transformed over and over again. So it's rather like the rise and fall of mankind, which Wells portrayed.
2,000 million years on. Extinction of life in solar system. Oh dear. I find out terribly moving. You know, I remember reading it for the first time and thinking, you know, that is really, really something. And something we've got to face up to.
Well, it's many years since I read Stapleton's Last and First Men, but it did have a terrific impact on me. You know, opened up these vistas of deep time. So that was very, very important influence. I have a feeling that I went straight back to the beginning and read it again.
But in his book Star Maker, Stapleton went even further and took his readers beyond the infinite.
It's a really extraordinary thought adventure, a mental voyage into the utmost reaches of the cosmos.
This man goes to the top of a hill and projects himself into the cosmos in search of the great overall ruling force, the Star Maker itself.
And then the vision takes him first to another world, a kind of alternative vision of the Earth.
Religion was a much greater power than on my own planet. But there had seldom been any agreement as to the taste of God, whether he was in the main sweet or salt. Some teachers insisted that only the feet could taste him, others only the hands or the mouth.
But then, I mean, when you're rolling about in your chair, he goes on to describe what the next universe is going to be like.
And then gradually expands in scale in a whole series of stages until you get to this vision which attempts to encompass not just the entire universe, but the universe as one element in a whole sequence of created universes.
There were men that had developed from a slug-like ancestor, along a line which was not vertebrate, still less mammalian. In other worlds, man had developed from 5-pronged animals, rather like starfish. Their faces, of course, were apt to be far from human.
Stapleton, I think, in Star Maker is very interested in looking at alternative patterns of evolution. What other things might evolutionary sequences have produced? You can't really test the limits of evolutionary theory until you have more than one case to look at. And I think that's what Stapleton is trying to do in Star Maker. He's trying to place our evolutionary context in a much broader one.
Stapleton had taken Wells's quest to discover the evolutionary future of mankind far out into the universe. At the end of his journey was a mystical encounter with the Star Maker himself. The illumination which flooded in on me, struck me down to blind worship, was a glimmer of the Eternal Spirit's own all-penetrating experience. I felt something of the Spirit's temper as it apprehended in one intuitive and timeless vision all our lives.
He's using this supposedly very secular scientific theory to explore themes which are really basically religious. One of the common effects which is talked about in science fiction, which is the sense of wonder, the wow moment, which itself is a moment of vision. And this is, a moment of kind of religious ecstasy where you see the enormity of the universe, or you see the truth within a single cell, or whatever it might be. And this is what makes science fiction, I think, an heir to the same kind of tradition as people like William Blake and Julian of Norwich, and frankly, religious ecstatics.
And the towering Star Maker. Why do I like it so much? Because it is so far beyond the flights of imagination of ordinary man. But why do I hate it? Because I know I'll never achieve anything like it.
Up until the 1930s, British science fiction had existed in a world of its own. But in the 1940s, we experienced an alien invasion of another kind.
I've sighted a spaceship. It's one of Ming's ships from Mongol. Come here, quick. Dale, take the controls.
Overcoloured, overblown, and over here, American pulp fiction arrived in Britain with a bang.
They missed us with the heat ray.
This arrived in Britain in Woolworths department stores, where they had sections of what were described as Yank mags, which were sold off very cheap because they'd been shipped over from New York as ballast on transatlantic ships.
These magazines took science fiction to a popular audience it hadn't reached since Wells. Exciting, vivid, and easy to read, they portrayed a more optimistic future than British readers were used to. This time, progress was all set to triumph.
The protagonist in an American science fiction novel, an American popular novel, is somebody who owns the action, who ends up achieving the world that we all deserve to get or hope to get.
It's about conquering new frontiers, very much a spin-off of the Western. And space became, in American science fiction, the final frontier. And American science fiction developed this idea of a continuing project whereby space travel would allow us to colonize the moon and then the other planets and eventually the stars.
This outgoing American-style science fiction had a big impact on British writers and audiences. In the post-war years, it was an optimism that we were eager to embrace. In British films like Fire Maidens from Outer Space, we took to the stars with pioneering zest.
Within the moon's temple of love dwell the Fire Maidens of outer space, dedicated to the purpose of creating a new race of supermen and holding captive all who fall under their spell.
Schoolboys under cover of study devoured the adventures of Dan Dare, Britain's Flash Gordon. Families gathered to listen to the BBC's own Journey into Space.
Strap yourselves in.
Well, what are you going to do?
Help you get back to your own time.
You mean we're not there yet?
If you were, you wouldn't be out here in space, would you?
Oh, no.
And we even tried to go there for real. Project Y was a top-secret British and Canadian venture, an attempt to build a real-life flying saucer. And the British rocketry program, Blue Streak, also aimed high.
2, 1, liftoff. Ignition sequence start.
From the sort of the mid-50s through to the moon landings, I think there was an amazing craze for outer space, for the future. You know, I mean, if you look at 1960s washing machine adverts, they all look like adverts for spaceships, and the whole idea that, you know, people would eat frozen dinners because astronauts did.
But you could only eat so much freeze-dried food, and it wasn't long before British science fiction returned to the darker possibilities of evolution.
We'd like to say that, in our opinion, it is not suitable for children or for those of you who may have a nervous disposition.
The 3 Quatermass series, written by Nigel Neal, were a successful combination of American chutzpah and British sensibility.
The Quatermass serials were the first kind of great science fiction franchise to come from television. In America, at the same time, television science fiction was Captain Video. I mean, it was really childish cardboard space helmets and gosh wow Space Ranger stuff. I think the clever thing about the Quatermass experiment was that the Radio Times said it was a thriller.
Where are the others? Victor! Victor! What happened?
And that meant that a mainstream audience who might not have watched it if they thought it was just that Buck Rogers stuff for kids were tuned into it.
For the past year, this country, and probably others, has been under the influence of
Look, Frank, you'll have to sub this to make it sound right, but under the influence of something from outside the Earth.
In the third and most